So this concludes the meditation of today. I hope you have had some time to relax and find some inner peace for today. Some of you may just returning from work. Some of you may still be in the morning. So you can use this inner peace to give you some strength in the day to do good things and to find concentration, to find clarity of mind. Today's topic will be about some clarity of mind. It will be about giving advice and sharing advice with one another. This will be today's topic. And we have previously discussed the importance of spiritual friendship in our lives. Spiritual friendship is important because when we have spiritual friendship, we have people who can advise us and give us encouragement to lead a good, to lead a moral, sorry, to lead a good and spiritual life. So today we will be talking about that. So I will just share the presentation with you today. As we will be talking about the art of accepting and giving advice. Now I'm going to give you the chance to unmute yourself. If you want to ask me any question, please do so. But please be so courteous to mute yourself again after you've asked the question or given the comment, because in that way we won't have any background noise coming in. But do feel free to ask any questions if you have any. Okay. Now, we have previously talked about the importance of self-insight. Now, there is a very famous metaphor in Buddhism, which says that when we are born into this world, we are used to focus our attention outwards since our birth, and that we are so used to our habits and the way we are living our lives that we can be compared sometimes with a fish who is used to the water. And if you ask a fish, what is water, then it won't be able to answer, even if you could speak the same language, because a fish has always been in the water. It won't be able to describe what water is because it's never been anywhere else. In the same way, it's often difficult for us to identify and to fix our habits or even to improve on them. So first of all, before we are talking about giving advice to one another, it's important to realize it's also it's a big challenge to get to know ourselves really fully, and therefore we need to have spiritual friendship for people to be able to guide us and to give us advice and to be a mirror to us. Sometimes in Buddhism we call it, we describe spiritual friendship with being like a mirror to one another. This is not a traditional metaphor, but it's useful because we are often in need of a mirror to get to know each other, get to know ourselves. Just like we sometimes are not sure if there's something, something we need to, we have some, do we have some, something like a spot on our face or some dirt on our face, then we need a mirror to make sure that we know that. So in the same way, sometimes another person can be a mirror to us and can tell us what things we can fix about ourselves and what things are already very good about ourselves. So that's where this topic comes in, the art of accepting advice from others. Not easy, but very useful art to learn in our lives. I know from the time when I was just training in the temple, in our temple in Thailand, as most of you have already been there. I was still a volunteer at the temple, and I was allowed to stay at the male employees' house, which is a building next to the monks' buildings. And over there, you sleep in a quite simple place, but you do have a roof above your head. It's okay. And I noticed the culture of the employees in our temple, that whenever some more experienced person gave advice to another person, they would very humbly accept that advice by putting their hands together as they received that advice. I've always remembered it. It was such a powerful thing to see. And of course, there are many such people in our temple. And they also follow the advice of our teachers, especially Kunyai. Kunyai, who was the nun who founded our temple, she was always very humble, and she showed this example of humility, humbleness to all the people in the temple, and that's why it's an important part of our culture. But sometimes it's not only accepting, sometimes we also need to give advice to others. So how do we deal with that? So let's first talk about accepting advice. After all, we can't really give any advice to other people if we've never accepted any advice. The Buddha, he distinguished 3 ways to associate with people. Sometimes people are more morally and spiritually less far as us. You could say inferior, but it doesn't sound so good, does it? You could say some people are less developed than us morally and spiritually, and we can be there for them. We can guide them out of sympathy and compassion. Sometimes people are similar to us morally, spiritually. In that ways, that is also good to associate with such people, to inspire each other in conversation, to allow things to run smoothly. This is actually the Buddha's words. I don't know exactly what he means, but I presume it's about working together and to be at ease. And then there are those, and this is the most important one in this context, who are morally and spiritually further than us. And these people we call Kalyanamitta, people who can be a mentor, who can be an example to us, to help us grow in the moral, in the meditative, and the wise life. And the Buddha, he described the spiritual friend, or the Kalyanamitta, this word here, the spiritual friend. He said, I think you remember this from previous time we talked about this. Regard him as one who points out treasure, the wise one who, seeing your faults, rebukes you. So if you know somebody who is capable, who is kind enough to help you, to point out some mistakes that you might have in your character, or some mistakes that you might have made in your speech or in your actions, then you should consider such a person as somebody who points out treasure that is very hard to find. After all, it's much easier often to just walk away when somebody is acting in a way, or sometimes people, when they see somebody doing something wrong, they will just shout or say something nasty, but it's not really giving advice. So when we have somebody who gives us advice in a kind way, or at least in a useful way, in a constructive way, then we should really cherish somebody like that. I already mentioned previous time that the Buddha compared good friendship with the sun rising, and the first rays of sunlight, they tell us when the sun is rising. In the same way, good friendship is an indicator that we are going to progress on the spiritual path, because we have somebody to guide us. And then I talked about the story of Jyotipala and Gatikara. Do you remember? Perhaps you do. The story of Jyotipala and Katikara basically comes down to two people from very different backgrounds, and they share many things, but they are also different in their beliefs, and eventually Jyotipala convinces Katikala eventually convinces Jyotipala to see the Buddha and to practice meditation, to learn about spiritual life, but it's very difficult to do so. And at the end of the story, the Buddha reveals that he was the one who needed the advice. He was the one who was lost on the spiritual path, and he was the one who needed an advisor, a mentor. So he told this story to his assistant, the Venerable Ananda, and the Buddha and the Venerable Ananda was surprised about that, to hear that even the Buddha in a previous life had needed somebody who was his advisor. So this may be a bit confusing because I'm summarizing the story. If you want to understand what the story is about exactly, just go back to I think there's a YouTube recording. Maybe somebody would like to send the link in the chat box or something like that. So in short, when we have a spiritual friend, we do not only associate with that person to be in a good mood or something like that, but we also intend to learn. People around us that can help us, that can show a good example to us, we can learn from them. We can get to know the vocabulary and the way of living of the good and spiritual life. We can eventually emulate or try to act, or to at least be inspired by their example. And then there is the subject of giving advice. I did not talk about this much yet. Now, before you give advice, so I first already said that it's important to understand that we also need to have advisors ourselves. Even the Buddha in a previous life had an advisor, had a mentor. But sometimes we also need to give spiritual advice to others. First of all, we need to know other people first. And when we know people, we can advise them. Thank you for sharing the YouTube of the previous talk. So when we are getting to know other people, there's 4 ways which the Buddha taught we can get to know other people by observing. And the Buddha, he did warn that we can only understand the other person after getting to know them for a long time, by closely observing and using our wisdom. But if we do so, then it's possible to get to know another person well. First of all, he said, when you live together with somebody, you start to notice their moral discipline. How do they speak? How do they act? What kind of habits do they have? Are they reliable? Can they be responsible? But if you really want to know the truth in somebody, you have to work with them sometimes. You know, I know some people were very kind people, but when you really get to work with them, then you find out that sometimes there's some difficulty in working with them. We can get to know somebody more deeper if you have actually worked with them together. So this is a slightly different level of getting to knowing somebody. But when you really want to get to know somebody, you have to see them in misfortune. I'm not saying you have to cause misfortune, but I'm just saying that sometimes when you really want to know somebody, try look at them when they are in trouble. Try look at them when they are in difficulty. This is actually something you can use for yourself as well. When you really want to get to know yourself, look at yourself in difficult times. what kind of ways do you talk to yourself? What kind of ways do you converse with yourself? Do you try to find excuses, or do you try to inspire yourself? In what way do you do that? So this is patience. Patience not only in the sense of waiting or being able to wait, but patience also in the sense of tolerating things. In misfortune, we can see a person's patience. But how can you know somebody's wisdom? By conversation, the Buddha said. If we really want to know a person's wisdom, we have to talk with them and ask them a question and see how they answer. A person's wisdom can be easily noticed, or can be more easily noticed when you converse with them, when you talk with them. These are some basic guidelines of getting to know other people. Basically, it comes down to you cannot easily judge other people. So before you give advice to somebody, look at them, try to understand them, and realize that there are different contexts. They may be one person when you live together with them for a while, but there may be another person when you work with them. And they may be a completely different person in misfortune. So context is important when we want to understand another person. And we have to look at another person's strength. The Buddha, he said that when you see somebody do something wrong, look at their words, not their deeds. When somebody says something wrong, look at their deeds, not their words. Try to look at the good side of what people are and what they do. But even if they do all sorts of things that are wrong, then at least they have a good intention. So try to look at their intentions as well. Some people, they have, for example, they make a lot of noise when they get into the meditation room. If you have ever meditated in the meditation room, in a meditation center or temple, then you might sometimes have these cases when somebody comes in and makes a lot of noise coming in the meditation room. Now, those people, they do make a lot of noise, they do a lot of wrong things that are wrong, but they have a good intention to come to meditate. So sometimes we have to look at the intentions people have. Then when somebody doesn't do anything good at all, and it's difficult to find anything good about them, then realize that they are also suffering because of their own mistakes. There is a story that some American person took a Tibetan monk to see an exhibition about the Nazi Germany and the Jews, who were, of course, very horribly tortured and killed by the Nazis. And then this Tibetan monk, he was asked, how did he feel about the Jews coming from a very different culture and different country? And how did he feel about them? So the Tibetan monk, he said he felt he felt it was very bad things that the Nazis had done, but he also felt a lot of compassion for them. And he actually felt more compassion for them than for the Jews, not because the Jews didn't suffer. They suffered a lot, but their suffering would be finished in that life. But the Nazis, they would be followed by their own cruelty and their own suffering for many lifetimes to come. Now that is that is kind of a controversial thing to say, I know that. But it only shows that sometimes when somebody does something evil, that evil also is in him or in her. And that person also suffers from that evil or that wrong. So we have to have compassion even for those who do wrong. But then there is, of course, the other example when somebody only does something good, and then some people can even get angry of that. When somebody does a lot of good things, people sometimes get a bit envious or angry about that. So that is a case we can easily dismiss. Just try to look at the good things of other people and realize that whatever good they have, we also have some good. We do not need to be envious. So these are 5 examples of looking at other people and how to look at other people in a positive way. And I'll try to make this presentation available as a PDF. I will share it after the presentation is finished, so you can review it if you'd like. There is also a case when the Buddha was asked to pass judgment on other people, and he said that we should not easily pass judgment on other people. And he said that it even takes enlightenment sometimes to pass judgment on people. He said, it may sound a little bit, I alone or one like me may pass judgment on people. What he means by that, sometimes it takes a lot of wisdom and enlightenment to really be able to see through somebody. So in the time of the Buddha, there were 2 students of the Buddha, and one of them was a bit harsh or a bit difficult to deal with. But he would maybe have been a bit strict monk, very strict, maybe. But he was very wise. But there was another monk who was very disciplined and looked very disciplined in everything he did, but he was not very wise. And the Buddha said both of these monks eventually they were able to become, both of them, they were able to in the next life after that they were able to be able to go to a good life, the good environment. They attract good things. Both of them, in other words, they're very similar, spiritually speaking, but different in different ways. So sometimes we cannot easily judge. Some people may be good in one thing, but bad in another thing. So I'm going to skip a few slides here. It's quite a large presentation. But you may have heard of this metaphor when blind people are asked to touch an elephant, and all of them say it's another different object. So sometimes we have a part of the truth. We know something, but we don't know everything. So when you are realize that, sometimes it's good to think about that as well. When you are looking at somebody and wanting to give advice to somebody. But okay, sometimes we do need to give advice to other people. Then the Buddha says, first ask yourself 5 questions. Have my own actions been right? Have my own words been right? Is my heart filled with loving kindness or resentment? Because sometimes we want to give advice to another person so bad, we don't realize that actually we are still motivated by anger. And then when you get to know, you understand yourself, you've looked at yourself, then you can proceed. So sometimes when you give advice, you should first tell them that you're giving advice. Don't surprise them too much, because it might be more difficult for them to accept. And then the Buddha said there's actually 3 approaches that we can use in giving advice. And he told this to a man who trained horses. Maybe you've heard of this. It's a well-known teaching in Thailand. And this man who trains horses is depicted here in this picture. And this man, he came to the Buddha, and the Buddha, the Buddha asked him, how do you train your horses? And he said, sometimes I train my horses by being very kind to them. So you can see he's carrying this horse. It's not a very clear picture. I couldn't find a clearer one. He's holding this horse and he's taking good care of it. And sometimes he says, this is how I will take care of my horse. This is how I will train him, by simply being kind to him. But sometimes some horses, they need harsh training. They need sometimes a whip. Sometimes in English, we call this the carrot and the whip, right? The carrot is the good part, the reward, the positive part, but the whip is the punishment. And sometimes we need both. Here you can see him applying both, taking good care of the horse, but he's also carrying a whip just in case. But then in some cases, he says, the Buddha asked him, what do you do when you can't train a horse at all? You just can't train it. You can't get it used to carrying people. You can't get it used to running. It just won't obey. What do you do? And then this man, I should let you know that this man is not a Buddhist yet at this point. So this man, he just honestly says, if I can't train the horse at all, I'm just going to kill it. So you can see him depicted here with a sword, and he's about to kill this horse. I think this is the child-friendly version, so you don't actually see him kill the horse. So this is sometimes necessary, he says. Okay. So then the Buddha says, well, when I train my monks, it's not that different. When I train my monks, and we can use this method even if we give advice to other people, sometimes we need to emphasize rewards and kindness. We inspire another person. This is the soft approach, the first approach. Sometimes, however, we need to be harsh. We need to remind other people not of the advantages of doing good, but of the disadvantages of doing something wrong. Maybe you have a coworker who's always gossiping, and you might talk for hours about how nice it is to give a compliment to other people, but they don't get it. But if you talk to them, how very dangerous it is to always be gossiping about others, and that it always comes back to them like dust thrown into the wind, then they might get it when they understand the disadvantages. This is like the whip, not the carrot, but the whip, the hard approach. And sometimes we need to have both. Okay, you have to learn to stop to gossip because it will come back to you and you will be suffering as a result. But you should also learn to give a compliment. And we can use both the soft and the hard approach, emphasizing the positive and the negative, depending on the person. But sometimes we just need to let go of somebody. And the Buddha says, sometimes I need to kill my monks. And, and then the horse trainer is very shocked. He says, how can you kill your monks? You are a monk, you cannot kill another monk. And then the Buddha says that he meant it metaphorically. He will not kill a monk. Of course, he will never do that. But if at a certain point, the community of monks and nuns will decide they cannot advise somebody because he's simply beyond advice, then in that way, they will start to ignore them, ignore that person. And because of that, you could say that that person effectively is killed, is cut off from the spiritual life because he no longer has the opportunity for to learn, to grow, because nobody feels it's useful to advise that person anymore. That's a very sad thing to happen. So you could say that somebody's cut off from the spiritual opportunity of growth. So this is an example of how the Buddha compared the advice, giving advice to others, with the training of a horse. Of course, it's not similar. It means not the same, but it's similar in some ways. And then sometimes this is a very useful advice. I have actually somebody at the temple right now who I'm trying to give some guidance about some things. And I know that sometimes it may not be possible to help him at this point because this is a very old habit that he has. And it's not acceptable in a temple. But if I don't advise him, this is a lay person, and then people will not accept him and he will not have any friends. So it's a difficult judgment call, but sometimes we have to try to give somebody the chance to join the spiritual life continuously. But if we cannot give them any advice, then we sometimes have to let go of somebody. To end with, I would like to end with a quote. This is the Buddha and his attendant, the Venerable Ananda, in a very nice picture, very nice, very ancient image. And the Venerable Ananda asked the Buddha, is half of the spiritual life good friendship? And the Buddha said, no, it's the entire spiritual life. Good friendship, good companionship, good comradeship is the entire spiritual life. So this is my presentation for today. I hope it was useful and that you could use some of it. So now I will try to save the presentation as a PDF. So maybe you can use the PDF and you can take a look at the notes. Maybe useful. So I'll try to do that now. Just a moment. And there it is. So it's now uploading. You can see it in the chat box. If you can't find the chat box, it's down below. There's a little balloon. It says chat, and then you can download it from there. So I would like to thank you all for your attention today. And we already ran out of time. Maybe next time we can do a bit of questions, but today it's already run out of time. So again, thank you for your joining, and I'll give the word back again to our presenter for today, MC Mickey.
Thank you, Venerable Sanders, for your teachings and Dharma talk about giving and giving advice and receiving as well. So I would like to ask Venerable Sanders if he can give a blessing before we leave.
Sure. So I would like to give all of you health, wisdom, and may all of you find peace in your life. May you always find wise people on your path. And may you attain the inner brightness, clarity, and wisdom of the Dhammakaya for a long time. Sadhu.
Okay, everyone, let's put our palms together and pay respect to Venerable Sanders by bowing and saying Namaskaran together. Namaskaran. Okay, and let's have a finishing photo of everyone. So if you may turn on your cameras and smile for us. Okay, smile. Hey, who's taking the picture for you? Okay. Smile. And one with the palms together. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I hope to see you all next week. Sadhu.
Sadhu. Bye, everyone. Hello. Bye, Kathleen, Carsten.
Take care, everyone. Have a good day.
Have a good night. Have a good day. นมัสการหลวงพี่ลินคอล์นพลอย Kathleen, Maya. See you tomorrow, everyone.
Bye.
Bye bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Bye bye. Good night.